When's the last time Congress did something meaningful against a tech giant that actually stuck? If you answered never in recent memory, you'd usually be right, but in a plot twist that probably has Meta's army of lawyers nervously adjusting their ties, Congress not only passed a law enforcing TikTok to sell or shut down, they actually won in court, unanimously, at the Supreme Court in 2025. Let's break down how we got here and why it matters. Before we dive into the legal drama, let's talk about why social media platforms like TikTok deserve this level of scrutiny. The stats are staggering. Mental health researchers found teens who spend 3+ hours a day on social media face twice the risk of poor mental health outcomes. Recent studies show 67% of teens use TikTok, with average users spending 95 minutes per day on the platform. Social media platforms collected more user data in 2023 than in all of 2010 through 2015 combined. TikTok specifically has access to phone contacts, precise location data, device fingerprinting, keystroke patterns, all private messages, biometric data, and network connection details. But here's where it gets interesting. TikTok isn't just another data-hungry social media platform. It's one controlled by ByteDance, a company that, according to the Supreme Court record, is legally required to assist or cooperate with Chinese intelligence work and ensure the Chinese government has the power to access and control private data. Here's a timeline of how things in this case actually got done. In 2020, President Trump tried to ban TikTok through executive orders. Spoiler alert, it didn't work because courts found he exceeded his authority.
They didn't know that I was going to be the president, I guess.
This is what we call foreshadowing. In 2021 through 2022, ByteDance spent those years negotiating with the US government, trying to find a way to keep operating without actually changing anything fundamental about their operations. Classic corporate strategy, really. In 2024, Congress shocked everyone by passing the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act, with overwhelming bipartisan support, 352 to 65 in the House, 79 to 18 in the Senate. When's the last time Congress agreed on anything with those margins? The law gave TikTok two options. Number one, sell to American owners, or number two, get banned. No complicated loopholes, no vague standards, just a simple choice. TikTok and some content creators sued, arguing this violated the First Amendment. Their basic argument, what about our free speech? The Supreme Court's response was essentially, nice try, but national security is a thing. Here's what makes this ruling fascinating. The court recognized this wasn't about censorship. The law doesn't care what content is on TikTok. It cares about who has access to Americans' data. They applied intermediate scrutiny, legal speak for the government needs pretty good reason, but not an absolute perfect one. And the government's reason for preventing a foreign adversary from harvesting vast amounts of personal data from 170 million Americans cleared that bar easily.
Does TikTok access the home Wi-Fi network?
Only if the user turns on the Wi-Fi. I'm sorry, I may not understand the...
So if I have a TikTok app on my phone and my phone is on my home Wi-Fi network, does TikTok access that network?
The court specifically noted that ByteDance can access any stored data in the user's contact list, including information about people who never agreed to TikTok's terms of service. Think about that. TikTok can collect about you even if you've never used the app. While everyone's focusing on whether TikTok will shut down, they're missing the bigger picture. Congress created a framework for dealing with foreign-controlled apps that pose security risks. This isn't just about TikTok. It's about setting precedent for how we handle digital security threats in an interconnected world. The law's genius lies in its simplicity. Clear criteria for what makes an app a security risk, simple remedies, sell or shut down, strong enforcement mechanisms, and a focus on ownership structure rather than content. Why this actually matters? Well, number one, data security. The court's opinion reveals TikTok collects keystroke pattern and rhythms, device contacts and calendars, network connection data, behavioral patterns, private message content. All of this data could be accessed by a foreign adversary. Number two, corporate accountability. For once, a tech platform couldn't just lobby its way out of a regulation. The law sets clear, unavoidable requirements. Number three, national security. the court recognized that in the digital age, data collection can be a national security threat. This shifts the conversation from it's just an app to it's a potential surveillance tool. And number 4, legislative precedent. Congress showed that it can regulate tech platforms effectively when it focuses on concrete security issues rather than trying to control content. TikTok chose to go dark rather than immediately comply with the law. This looks suspiciously like a pressure tactic, especially given that the law gives them time to arrange a sale. They could have started this process months ago, and the incoming Trump administration has signaled willingness to work with them. But here's the kicker. Even if Trump wants to help TikTok, the law doesn't give the president much wiggle room. The only real option is facilitating a sale to American owners. No amount of presidential goodwill can override the core requirements Congress put in place. That means going forward, other foreign-owned apps will face increased scrutiny. Expect more companies to proactively address security concerns. The era of tech platforms operating with minimal oversight may be ending. Congress found a regulatory approach that works and courts will uphold. Data collection practices will face more scrutiny. The court's detailed discussion of TikTok's data collection practices sets a precedent for considering such collection a national security issue. The quote-unquote, it's just an app defense is dead. The court's opinion makes clear that seemingly innocent applications can pose serious security risks through data collection. In an era where meaningful regulation of tech platforms seems impossible, Congress actually managed to pass a law with real teeth, get bipartisan support, craft something that survives Supreme Court review, address a legitimate national security concern, and create a framework for future action. That's almost enough to restore your faith in a functional democracy. Almost. Remember, this isn't about TikTok's content or even social media addiction. Though those are serious issues, it's not even about whether we're comfortable letting foreign adversaries collect massive amounts of data about Americans. Congress decided we're not, and the Supreme Court agreed they have the power to do something about it. Rather, it's about the fact that Congress actually did something and it stuck. In this day and age, that's a surprise. Maybe, just maybe, this is what effective digital age regulation looks like. Focus on concrete security issues, clear requirements, and straightforward enforcement mechanisms. Who knew Congress had it in them? But wait, what good is it for Congress to actually accomplish something when it turns out just hours later, we're about to witness a classic American political showdown between legislative and executive power with a dash of corporate maneuvering thrown in for good measure? What's happened in the span of about 12 hours? TikTok went dark, sort of. The app disappeared from Google and app stores. Users got the sorry TikTok isn't available message. ByteDance, other apps, CapCut, Lemonade also vanished from stores, and existing users briefly lost access to the platform. Trump stepped in, announced he'll issue an executive order on Monday, wants to extend the implementation period, pushing for 50% American ownership.
So I said, I'll approve, but let the United States of America own 50% of TikTok. I'm approving on behalf of the United States.
Trump claims that he discussed this with Xi Jinping directly. Trump apparently has a warm spot in his heart for TikTok now.
TikTok is back.
Quite the evolution from trying to ban it in 2020. And TikTok magically reappeared. Service restored within hours, published a fawning thank you to Trump. CEO Xiao Chu gets prime seating at Trump's inauguration. Subtle, guys. And you still can't download the app from stores, though. Suddenly, everyone wants a piece of TikTok. Frank McCourt and Kevin O'Leary offered $20 billion. Perplexity AI proposed a merger without buying the algorithm, interestingly. Steven Mnuchin, Trump's former Treasury Secretary, is assembling investors, and rumors about Elon Musk, because, of course. This is where it gets legally spicy. The Supreme Court just unanimously upheld this law. It's not some vague executive authority. It's clear congressional legislation that passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, sets specific requirements for divestiture, has clear implementation deadlines, and was explicitly validated by the highest court. Republican Senators Tom Cotton and Pete Ricketts immediately pointed out that there was no legal basis for Trump's planned extension. They're not wrong. The law is pretty clear-cut. We're potentially heading for a fascinating constitutional question. Can the president effectively pause the implementation of a law that was passed by Congress, upheld by the Supreme Court, has already taken effect, and specifically limits executive discretion? This isn't just about TikTok anymore. It's about the separation of powers. Trump's planned executive order essentially says, ignore the law Congress passed and the Supreme Court upheld. That's bold. ByteDance's strategy here is fascinating. They plan to refuse to sell for months, let the app go dark briefly, create public pressure, quickly restore pressure based on Trump's social media posts, butter up the incoming administration, and hope the legal details sort themselves out later. That's either brilliant or risky. They're betting that public pressure will force a solution, Trump can actually deliver what he's promising, courts won't immediately block the executive order, and Congress won't fight back. Lost in all the drama is the fundamental issue. TikTok still collects vast amount of user data, and ByteDance is still subject to Chinese law requiring cooperation with intelligence services. Nothing about Trump's proposed intervention changes these basic facts. While this plays out, Meta and Snap stock prices rose, betting on user migration. VPN searches spiked when TikTok went dark. Alternative apps saw download surges. Marketing firms are in hair on fire mode. And 7 million small businesses that use TikTok are in limbo. So what happens next? Well, there's several possibilities. Trump issues an executive order, gets challenged in court immediately. ByteDance finally agrees to sell under pressure. Congress fights back against executive overreach. We enter a weird legal limbo where TikTok operates in a gray zone, or the whole thing becomes a constitutional crisis. This isn't just about one app anymore. We're watching the limits of executive power, the effectiveness of congressional regulation, corporate influence on policy, national security versus business interests, and real power of social media platforms. The irony, a law intended to provide clarity about foreign-controlled apps has created even more uncertainty. Congress did something decisive, only to have it immediately changed by executive action. Stay tuned. This is either the beginning of actual tech regulation in America or another example of how impossible it is to effectively regulate tech giants. Either way, it's going to be interesting. Let's acknowledge the surreal elephant in the room. We've managed to mobilize every branch of government, spark international diplomacy, generate instant bipartisan action, and potentially append constitutional precedent over TikTok. Not healthcare, not climate change, not education, not housing affordability, not infrastructure, not election security, TikTok. Somehow, a Chinese-owned app where people post dance videos and cooking tutorials has accomplished what decades of pressing national issues couldn't, getting Congress, the Supreme Court, and 2 administrations to actually do something. The fact that this is finally what got the gears of government turning at full speed is either hilarious or depressing, depending on your perspective. Probably both. And remember, while all the political drama plays out, at its core, this saga isn't about TikTok, data privacy, national security, small business, or political personalities. It's about a far more fundamental question. What happens when Congress actually manages to do its job? In this case, they identified a problem, crafted clear legislation, got overwhelming bipartisan support, survived Supreme Court scrutiny, and still might see it all unravel through executive action. They followed every rule in the Democratic playbook, passed the law through both chambers, got a presidential signature, and defended it in court, and yet here we are, watching it potentially crumble in real time. It's like watching a textbook example of how laws are supposed to be made, only to discover there's a whole chapter missing about what happens when the system works exactly as designed, and still might fail. If this is what happens when Congress functions properly, no wonder they usually don't bother trying. Maybe the real TikTok challenge is figuring out what that says about American democracy.